Hello, my name is Mr. Cadell, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a slab vessel. Notice this is a student-made slab vessel that's mounted on actually a slab right here, so a cylinder mounted on a slab. Here's a more advanced one. This is a triangular prism mounted on a slab as well. Still a slab vessel though. Notice that it does have coils for the details as well. And here are some glazed examples, very simple examples here, so it doesn't have to be a cylinder. It can be a rectangular prism or a triangular prism too. This actually has a circle on the bottom too, so it kind of transforms there. There's some ideas. The first thing you want to do is you're going to take your piece of clay and you're going to mold and make it, kind of shape it into a potato, or I guess you could say a small football shape. Doesn't have to be perfect, just something like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and press this out just like this. I'm going to make a slab by pressing it out, and notice that I'm flipping it over repeatedly. That is so it doesn't stick to the table or to the mat, whatever you may be using. That is very important. If you just keep pressing, eventually it'll stick to the table or mat, and then you have to scrape it off, and then it becomes a much more difficult piece of clay to use. And again, don't worry if there's extra clay or dry clay or whatever on the table and it gets stuck in the slab that you're creating. That's no problem whatsoever. And notice there are little dimples and little wrinkles and things like that. Don't worry, those all get flattened out, and we can smooth those out a little bit later. It's really enjoyable to work with clay. I just want to make sure that you follow all the directions. Notice that it's becoming an oval and not a circle. That is very important. There we go. One of the big mistakes that I see, other than people pressing too hard and getting it stuck to the table, is that they only press maybe in one spot and they got maybe one part that's really thick and one part that's really thin. So you want to make sure that you are not only flipping it over, but pressing evenly to create this oval. Again, not a circle, but an oval. There we go. I'm just pressing gently in different areas. There. Now, this is still just a little too thick. You can see the thickness of my finger and the thickness of the slab. They're almost the same there, and you don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that it is pressed out fairly thin, not super thin, because then it'll become pretty hard to work with and fall apart a lot. There we go. There. So it's just thick enough for a good slab, but not too thin. It won't fall apart. Now I'm going to be taking my oval, and now I'm going to take just any tool, and I'm going to draw the biggest rectangle I can. Now, one of the big mistakes I see people do is they make a really small rectangle. You want to make the biggest rectangle you can, so big that actually the corners will touch the edge of the clay, and that's very important. So you're drawing your rectangle just like that. And if you need to erase or whatever, or just kind of redraw it to kind of fix it, that's totally fine too, okay? Now, I have my rectangle drawn. It looks satisfactory. I'm going to go ahead, trim off these extra pieces. These extra pieces are really important because you'll be using those in just a moment. There. Now I'm going to take a little bit of water, add it to these extra pieces, roll it up into a sphere. You don't want a bunch of little pieces of clay just kicking around your table, because those little pieces of clay will dry out real fast and you're going to need those. Now I'm going to gently pick up my slab, add just a touch of water, just a little bit of water to both sides, because this slab we're going to be bending and it's going to want to crack. So be very gentle, just a little bit of water, kind of smooth in there. There we go. Now you don't want to just lay this flat and smooth in the water, because if you do that to both sides, eventually it will stick. So you just want to be very gentle with it. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to roll it into a cylinder so those two edges meet, okay? So you see, if I flip it over here, I have my cylinder, okay? Now this won't stick together, it won't stay together like this. We have to score and slip this edge. So I'm going to take my knife here. You could use a lot of different tools. I have a couple different kinds of tools here that you could use. Anything that'll just kind of draw lines. This is called the score and slip method. The score and slip method. This is the scoring part. So you're going to be adding a lot of lines, just like this, to one of those edges we're going to connect. Now you're going to draw parallel lines on the other side. And not just a few lines. You're going to be drawing lots of those lines. I might even switch to this tool. It's a little bit thinner. There we go. Now you want a lot of these lines. The reason why is because when you connect these pieces of clay, here's what's going to happen. Those lines will interlock and the kiln that we fire the clay in will shrink the clay about 10%, and then all those clay lines will shrink together and lock together, and that's very important. If you were just to smush this together, it would run the very major risk of falling apart. So now I'm going to do the slip part, which is I'm going to add just a little bit of water. Technically, slip is watered down clay, but we're just going to use a little water. Then I'm going to just take those lines and very gently press them together. What I'm doing right now is I'm taking those two pieces of clay and I'm pressing them together. And this takes some practice and takes a little bit of time to do. You can notice that it's starting to stick together there. The worst thing you could do is actually smooth over those lines and then try putting it together. There we go. And don't worry if it doesn't look like a cylinder yet. So right now mine's still kind of squished there. That's totally fine. I could reshape it. My main focus right now is getting those lines locked together in the score and slip. There we go. Once I got them locked together, I can put my hand inside the cylinder. I can support it, and I can smooth over that part just like that. Now I'm going to gently pick this up. I'm going to smooth it over on the inside. You can still see that little seam on the inside. Smooth it over here on the top. Eventually, I'll flip it back over and smooth it out on this side too. So much so that you will almost not be able to tell where the seam was at. It's almost like it was completely erased. Now, I'm going to create my cylinder, and it's still kind of rough, that's fine. As we work with it, we can add more details and clean it up, but we want to get the general shape. Okay, so there's my shape. Now I'm going to take my extra clay that I had that was really important, and now I'm going to create another slab. Now remember, you should be flipping this over. Notice it was wanting to stick right there. Some clay kind of came off there, so I have to be very careful here. I'm going to make my slab. This slab should be a little thicker since it's the bottom of this vessel, and when people take a vessel and they lay it down, that bottom will hit the table, so you don't want a really thin slab on the bottom there. You want to make sure that it is just a little thicker, not super thick, but just a little thicker than you made for your cylinder that we just got finished with. See how some of that clay came off there? And that's perfectly fine. You can smush that back in, but that means that maybe I might need to clean off my mat or my table right there. Sometimes if there's a little bit of water on the mat or table, it might stick to that part too as well. So you got to be kind of careful. There. I got my slab made. The next thing I want to do is this. I'm going to take my cylinder, put it on top, make sure it's shaped correctly, put it on top there. Then I'm going to trace around and also cut. If you want to, you could actually do both at the same time. Now I'm moving sort of quickly. Of course, you'll take your time doing this. There we go. Take off this extra clay that's around it. Again, add just a touch of water to it. Roll it back up into a sphere. We'll be using this extra clay soon too. I'm going to take off this cylinder. And you see I have that slab here. Now, just as we did with the cylinder, I'm going to add lots of lines. The score and slip method is very important. So, here's a question for you. Should I just add lines just to this bottom slab, or should I also add it to the cylinder as well? If you said the cylinder, you are right. So after I get done adding all these lines here, remember you want a lot of them, and you don't want them just like kind of just barely scratched in. You want to make sure that you have a lot of those lines. So, and they're kind of deep. There we go. Just like this. Now when you do this step, take your time. You could use different tools as long as they're nice lines and also that they're parallel. You don't want these lines to crisscross. That is, you don't want one set of lines on one object that you're connecting perpendicular or crisscrossing with the other set of lines. They should match. Just like I showed you before with my fingers there, they should interlock with each other. There we go. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of water to it, the slip part. There we go. And this part, it's very careful not to smooth it over. Just barely touch that clay and let that water get into those lines. Now, I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it on top of my little slab that I made there, and I'm going to gently press down. You don't want to press down too hard. I'm going to gently press down, and then I'm going to slide it off my table. You can't see this in the video, but what I did was I just slid it right off the table, just very gently, and I picked it up. And now I can begin smoothing out. It's kind of rough down here. Don't worry about that. Get some people, they get a little frustrated sometimes because it looks a little rough. Don't worry, clay is very forgiving. I can go ahead and smooth that over there. And now the bottom is attached. Now we still have little wrinkles and, little divots and little dents and things like that. I can go back and fix all those. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the extra clay to add things like maybe handles or details or some of those other things in the examples that I showed you earlier. But that's how you make a very simple vessel. And if I wanted to, I can even take it just one more extra step here. And I could even start changing it. I can make a triangle if I want to. If I wanted to, I can make it a square at the top. If you wanted to, you can make the whole thing rectangular prism before you actually cut out the slab for the bottom. You could actually make the bottom of this as well. So remember, clay is very forgiving, it's very malleable, it's very flexible. It'll do a lot of different things that you want it to do.